Has Bob Chesney addressed every weakness from last year's team in this transfer portal cycle? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each day. It's free, whether it's your podcast and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. What we're talking about today, UCLA women's basketball and their newest ranking potentially coming up soon with a huge loss. We'll talk about UCLA men's basketball with a Sky Clark returning. What does the Northwestern game look like for both the men and the women in second and third segments? But let's lead off with this. Did Bob Chesney do enough? Currently, UCLA, according to On3, the Bruins are a top 10, top 11 team in the transfer portal rankings, which means what UCLA lost in talent, which wasn't a lot, is a lot better with what they're bringing in the transfer portal. The Bruins overall have 44 commits and signees between the JUCO level, between what is hard committed, and the guys who have either already arrived on campus or slowly arriving on campus, while Bob Chesney continues to make his way through every SoCal high school possible in the greater Los Angeles area and build relationships that have been fractured since the Chip Kelly era. UCLA needed to revamp the defense, right? They needed to revamp the front seven. You had a 6-year guy in John Vaughns. You had Isaiah Chisholm, who was expected to be a bit of a stopgap, hopefully, after you lost the dynamic duo of Kane Madrano. You had Femi coming off the edge. You mix in Carson Schlesinger, the defensive player of the year, rookie of the year at the NFL level, close to it. How are you going to replace that talent in production over the last couple of years? Well, that was a lot to fix for John Vaughns playing football only for the first time in a long time, and you mix in Chisholm coming from Oregon State. Well, with what UCLA's brought in, right? The big name is Sammy Omosigo, the 4-star transfer linebacker who contributed significantly, not as a full-time starter, but on a playoff defense that the Sooners ran with a lot of rotation at linebacker. Sammy is a big-time guy to bring to this UCLA linebacker room. You bring in Drew Spitigati, who comes over with the same experience for a playoff team and James Madison, and somebody who gets a leg up and a potential leader in the locker room who already knows the defensive calls of the Bruins JMU signee, if you will, Colin Hitchler, the former JMU defensive coordinator turned UCLA defensive coordinator. So UCLA's got quite a few linebackers. You mixed in Anthony Saka, who was a 4-star high school product, turned into a 3-star transfer from Notre Dame. And while there are other guys too, UCLA, I thought, filled the linebacking spot quite well. You go the D-line. UCLA had some big time potential D-line talents coming in. Well, they lost the freshmen that were recruited, like a Carter Gooden. They lost Anthony Jones. And what UCLA did was one of their 2 big transfers, one on offense, one on defense, was get Sahir West, who is looking at potentially Ohio State, looking at other potential places for a transfer. And the Bruins, maybe at the last moment, maybe had the inside track with the Bob Chesney relationship, and probably a much better chance to start, you brought in Sahir West, which really rounded out the class for this UCLA fan base, for all of us looking at the transfer portal. 2 guys you wanted from James Madison, and the Bruins got both. All right? So you bring in Sahir West, you bring in the talent on the edge, you mix in Aiden Gobert from JMU. UCLA has upgraded the D-line. Now is it the multi-million dollars that Texas Tech provided for their D-line, which brought in a guy who was going to commit to UCLA last year and was a part of their playoff line? I can't say it's that dominant, but it is significantly upgraded from one of the worst in the country. Now you look at the O-line. What has Bob Chesney targeted on the offensive line? What, close to 9-10 commits between the tackles, the guards, potential starting centers? You've got guys who can maybe play in a couple of spots, whether it's a Hall Schmidt, who is a starter at Boise State. You have starters like Carter Sweezy at JMU. You've got guys who, even as a backup, might have more size and ability than what UCLA starters had last year. And in the Big Ten, the Bruins had to get bigger, beefier, and more agile, all right? And that's what UCLA did in the portal on the offensive line. Complete overhaul for an O-line that couldn't establish a running game, which will be a no-go this year if the Bruins can't run the football. So you upgraded the O-line. You built a D-line that has more speed and more talent, and what the Bruins were targeting in the portal that they maybe didn't get, they were looking at speed and ability to get off the edge. And the UCLA Bruins got some of that, got some beef in the middle, both offensively and defensively on the line. And on the outside, the skill positions, the Bruins added some depth at receiver, right? They did lose a Quasi Gilmore. You lost some guys, but you bring in the Leland Smiths of the world. You bring in the likes of Aiden Mizell. You keep adding like Landon Ellis, amongst others, Brian Rowe Jr. They have guys who are big name playmakers or potential coming out of high school. You put that on an offense that they come in knowing it's not going to be true verticality every play, but there's an opportunity and they know their role. It's not, I'm here to get mine and leave. Like Rico Flores left after coming in for a couple of years. Quasi Gilmer left after a couple of years. The Bruins have added all that speed that can either make plays on the outside, that know what the role will be in this offense, which will be a run-first offense, and multiple options to make impact on special teams. So UCLA is looking at it from a multifaceted view. All right, defense, upgraded. You look at the secondary defensively, the Bruins, couple of guys brought in, Teo Johnson, a big safety get from Utah, but a lot of the secondary UCLA brought was retaining the talent that UCLA already had under Coach Mead's previous secondary, keeping his son, keeping guys who were looking elsewhere, entering the portal, namely Scooter Jackson, and he returns. Then you look at UCLA at the quarterback position. They can get more guys because they didn't have to overspend in the portal. And now Nico has been given a team, in my mind, that will prove whether he is worth the NFL hype, whether he was worth the hype at Tennessee, the transfer hype from Tennessee to UCLA, or was he overrated this whole time? That's the type of team Bob Chesney has built around Nico. More beef up front, more talent in the backfield, more depth there, including an all-purpose back like Wayne Knight to run multiple RPOs per game. And then Nico's got a team that he just doesn't have to carry. Because there are times last year where Nico was getting knocked down again and again, had to miss the Ohio State game. And then by the time the season was over, he was practically limping off the field with the amount of hits he took, spinning out of tackles. Now imagine if UCLA didn't force Nico to do that every single game. And instead of the Tennessee hype train like it was at the beginning of the 2025 season, which I certainly fed into, you go into 26, breather, calmer, cool, more collected head coach, better staffing around him, better teachers. And then UCLA, while they're not primed to be Indiana 2.0, will be so much improvement overall, more depth, that they'll be a more fun team to root for. And I think maybe outside of penalties, everything UCLA stands for, culture, what was it? Discipline, respect, enthusiasm. I think Bob Chesney will adhere to Deshaun Foster's three pillars better than Deshaun Foster ever did. With the guys he brought over, the potential impact guys that need to grow as freshmen that didn't play at other spots, and the other guys like an Omosigo who wants to burst onto the scene with a true starting role and a bulk role on a UCLA defense that's looking for front seven talent that they just did not have consistently in 2025. All right. So for a team that looks a lot better from what they lost to what they gained, UCLA, are there some holes? Certainly. I don't think there's a true gaping hole that Bob Chesney missed. Are there more talented guys that went other places instead of UCLA? Yes. The huge miss in my mind was a Dorian Thomas as a tight end who went to Cal instead of UCLA when he was leading UCLA early. You could have gotten maybe some top tier backs out of the FCS, but the Bruins said, hey, we'll go with the guy we're comfortable with in Wayne Knight from JMU. So the mixture of continuity and discipline, I think, overrides talent and overspending with what UCLA did in the portal. And the veteran presence should lead to better culture building and the want to go to UCLA in the future. Because this team's job isn't to make the playoffs. It's not to win a national championship in 2026, which could be all fine and dandy if they are a shock 12 CFP team. If they make it as the 12 seed, 10 seed, whatever that looks like, they're making it easier for Power 4 teams to make it. It's just this team is designed to showcase Bob Chesney can win, can recruit, he can coach, and UCLA is a destination. Curt Cignetti just sped up the whole process by doing that in 2 years. UCLA does not have to do that to be a successful product and still prove that this recruiting class, on three, proven that they're a top 11 in the transfer portal to be successful. Change the vibes, change the energy, and UCLA will still be on the doorstep to becoming a lot better program than they've been the last decade. Next, let's talk about UCLA men's basketball. Heading into a game against Northwestern, a big 6-game West Coast stretch that can change their season or can end it despite the Purdue win. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. And each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts so you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open the profit boost pack first thing in game day, and you'll see what boosts you want to apply. Maybe those boosts give you more juice on the bets you like instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Make your picks and then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL game day. Before we cruise on here on Locked On UCLA, let me encourage you to join the Locked On Everydayer Club. Yes, become an everydayer. You get ad-free audio if you join the Locked On Everydayer Club, and there's access to the members-only Discord. It's all built for you, the loyal fan. And hey, come click more, add more, look it up on the Locked On website, check it out. Go look up the Locked On Everydayer Club and become, hey, you want to listen to the ads in the one I just did? Well, skip it. You don't have to do it if you're part of the Locked On Everyday Club. No ads. Get through the ad-free audio. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty. UCLA men's hoops coming off their biggest win of the year. Their first quad one home victory of the season. UCLA's other quad one victory was at Washington. But a win at Washington isn't enough to sway the committee. It wasn't enough to sway the bracketologists to keep UCLA from the outside looking in. It was the remarkable comeback victory in the final 90 seconds against Purdue with all the eyes, all the fans watching them on John Wooden bobblehead night against Purdue that got the Bruins in the tournament. You look at Joe Lenardi, you look at the other bracketologists, UCLA goes from first four, next four out on the bubble with no chance in to now they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. They get the benefit of the doubt to beat a Purdue team that was preseason number one. So that means UCLA has played and beaten the preseason number one Big Ten team and number one team in the country. They have played and led the majority of the game against the number one team in the country in Arizona. They led 7-0 right off the jump against Gonzaga and competed for the majority of that game, although I would say the Zags controlled that whole game. And now you look at other opportunities, you're like, man, how did UCLA miss some of these golden opportunities? Well, they did. They're 3-6 in quad one and two games. That's what UCLA is. Now, how many of those games did they play with injuries? Outside of the Arizona game, you have what? I think Gonzaga, Washington, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Purdue, Cal, Penn State. Of the 9 games, 8 of them, UCLA was playing either banged up or injured. 8 of the 9 games, and even Donovan Dent might have been a little bit hurt during that Arizona game that he played through early in the season. 8 of the 9 games, UCLA was practically missing somebody or somebody was playing shorthanded. And now I know every team has injuries. But that gives you a perspective to none of those games were true home games. Arizona was in Los Angeles, but it wasn't at Pauley Pavilion. All those games usually away from home. So the only quad 2 win UCLA has this year is at Penn State. Not sure that's going to turn any heads. Your quad 1 wins at Washington and home versus Purdue. This game versus Northwestern last year was one of those games where UCLA led, pulled away, and the final 2 minutes, the Bruins have had a tendency in the Mick Cronin tenure to do choke jobs like Purdue did against UCLA. You're up 8, you're up 6, a minute and a half to go, you blow it. They're up big against North Carolina, blew it. Against Northwestern, it took a huge call. I forget who was the foul on or what the call exactly was, but it was a huge call that went UCLA's way when they were in the midst of choking away a late game lead again but they beat Northwestern on the road in Evanston. Last year, they blew the lead against Minnesota, but against Northwestern, they held the lead. Northwestern is a team who is led by one of the Big Ten's best, Nick Martinelli. He averages 24-ish points. He's hitting 52% from three, and he's got 6 boards, all right? Now, there's some other players. You got Aronson Page, Jaden Reed, but Martinelli can be a matchup nightmare, all right? He is a guy that can almost beat you single-handedly, and Northwestern's got nothing to lose. They just went to USC and won, so now that game against Northwestern is a quad 2 game at home for UCLA. It's a quad 2 game at home against a Northwestern team that is actually under 500, ironically enough. Northwestern is under 500. They're 9-10, 1-7 in Big Ten play, and their one win came at USC the other night when Elijah Arenas made his debut for the Trojans in the Galen Center. And that was enough to beat what was a one-time top 25 team on the road to boost their net ranking, that this could be a quality win for the time being for UCLA. Coming up for the Bruins, you've got Northwestern at home quad 2, Oregon on the road quad 2, a hurt and beat up Oregon, Indiana, who's been floating around the bubble, they got good metrics, but they're a home quad 2. Rutgers is a home quad 3, and Washington is currently a home quad 2. That's a lot of decent games, nobody horrible, but very winnable games with minimal, and I mean minimal travel for Mick Cronin and bunch, who kept getting quoted after the UCLA win versus Purdue, not about anything else, but about how much he hates Big Ten travel, which we already all know if you watched any press conference, any media availability, how much he hates the way the schedule is built. The schedule in the Big Ten is dumb. The travel is understandable. UCLA signed up for it. But the way the Big Ten schedules the basketball season is dumb. They're stupid. The way it is horrible. Like, why are they playing every night? I know national television and contracts dictate that. But the fact that you go from a Tuesday to a Thursday, a Friday, a Sunday, like, why can't we just go Thursday, Sunday, right? Or a Thursday, Saturday, and then everybody's back in class for 3 to 4 days a week, right? Go Friday, Sunday, nobody misses any classes. All right? That's what we're dealing with. So now we look at UCLA, who gets to stick at home until the middle of February. And by the time they play Michigan, they'll have had a week off to travel. It'll be President's Day weekend, so generally means you get that Monday off. You play Michigan State. You won't miss a lot of classes. After the Washington home game for the Bruins, it's 3 straight quad 1s, and 5 of UCLA's last 7 games are all quad 1 opportunities in the regular season. 5 of their last 7. So if you go 5-0 over this next stretch, 6-0 if you include the Purdue win, the Bruins have a resume that's got enough wins, 19. UNC did not have that many wins last year. Then you got resume building opportunities after that. You beat 1 or 2 of those teams, or just hold serve against the decent teams at home or on the road, namely Minnesota. You beat USC once. You beat an Illinois or Nebraska at home, one of which. And UCLA is solidly in the field. There's no question if they're in the field. The only question is what's going to take for them to turn it on as a collective unit, and the Sky Clark injury could be the one that puts it together. Xavier Booker's production and the Sky Clark health is important. Clark, who I think I saw Tracy McDonald of On 3 and Bruin Blitz put out, yeah, it's highly questionable if Clark is going to play in this game versus Northwestern. If there's a chance to give him more rest, you could. If Clark does not play against Northwestern, it gives him an extra week before he has to play in Eugene versus Oregon. Or you can get him some light minutes against Northwestern, get his feet wet, and then slowly build him back up over the next couple of days. Because you don't really want to mess with a lower leg, the leg injury, the hamstring, if you will, and test him too soon. So it's unknown if Clark's going to come back. Who is your best three-point shooter? So UCLA beat a solid three-point shooting team in Purdue with their three-point shooter out and better three-point shooting numbers from Trent Perry, Bilodeau, and that was it. One made 3 from Donovan Dent, and that was all the Bruins wrote. So if Clark's healthy, that can start building towards March for what Cronin wants as his final 5. Because right now it is Trent Perry, It's Donovan Dents. You mix in Booker if Booker is liked or not that day by Cronin, Eric Daly Jr. and Bilodeau. And sometimes we'll see Brandon Williams, sometimes we won't. Maybe Jamerson's heart and hustle that day. We'll see. In this game versus Northwestern, though, if Sky Clark is not healthy, I like to see a big game from Jamar Brown. Jamar Brown is that type of player who's not going to win the game versus Purdue. He might not even play. He didn't play big minutes against Arizona and didn't do so against Purdue. But he would win the game if UCLA is struggling against the Northwestern, against Oregon or Rutgers or Washington. One of those earlier games against a potential mid-major in the tournament where you're an 8-9, maybe you're 7-10 if the Bruins get up to that level in the tournament seeding. They play a good upstart mid-major team that's highly seeded for them. And you got smaller guards. That's where Jamar Brown could thrive, play good defense and rebound. That's the level he's been playing at, the JUCO to the Summit League. And maybe he could do something similar against Northwestern that he couldn't use or do against Purdue and Braden Smith in the other game that Cronin just didn't let him do by the lack of minutes. So look for Jamar Brown to be an impactful player against Northwestern, especially if Clark is still down injured. So he can give Dent more rest, he can give Perry more rest, he can give anybody a little bit more time on the bench as a veteran guard and a three-point shooting weapon, just maybe not against top teams. Next, let's talk about UCLA women. Who's the top player Northwestern Wildcats on the women's side have? And what does South Carolina's loss to Oklahoma mean for UCLA? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Don't be like me. Don't let tax season take over your life. You know it's coming soon. You let it lag. And the next thing you know, you're rushing and maybe you make a mistake and you're like, that could be a mistake. But this year, TurboTax is making it easier for you and me than ever before to hand things off and just move on with your day. TurboTax Full Service. Have your taxes done by a trusted local expert. You know who's not an expert? Not me. Most likely not you. But from start to finish, they'll do it without the stress or the guesswork. The TurboTax local expert. Who needs to take those extra hours to fill out forms over a week, over a stressful night before your taxes are due? Meet with the local TurboTax expert in person, or if you don't like to socialize or meet in person, connect online and they'll handle everything. W-2s, self-employed forms, all those combined, and they'll work to get every deduction. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for your last year, all you gotta do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, the biggest news for UCLA on the women's basketball front was not their dominant win over Purdue or what is expected to be their first Big Ten game against Northwestern as a Big Ten conference member on the women's basketball side. It's the fact that South Carolina went to Norman and lost. Why is that important? UCLA is jostling for position on the 1 seed line and looking for a guaranteed 1 seed. Vandy's currently undefeated in the women's side. You've got Texas, South Carolina, UCLA, and UConn are holding down the fort against the supposed SEC powers in women's basketball. All right. UCLA is the cream of the crop in the Big Ten. Michigan's up there too. And I think when February 8th comes around, the Bruins will have a chance to prove who is the clear best team on the West Coast, one of the best teams in the country, if not the best, and who deserves a 1 seed. South Carolina went to Oklahoma. Why is that important? UCLA beat Oklahoma on a neutral site earlier this year and did so not easily, but going away. So conference road games are tough. Oklahoma was leading South Carolina for a good portion. This was a nationally televised game where there wasn't a lot else to watch. So my eyeballs were watching it. I was intense. I was like, man, this is a huge game. South Carolina went to Norman. Oklahoma had this game won in regulation. They were up 6, about 2 minutes to go, had the ball up 2 with about a minute to play. They could have let the shot clock wind down to a minute, turned it over, gave up South Carolina's tying bucket. Then they gave up the lead only for them to tie it on a putback in the final 20 seconds. Great defense. And then the Aaliyah Chavez show started. And Chavez was one of the top players UCLA was looking at in the last recruiting cycle. But she really wouldn't have played or fit in for this roster because she wouldn't have gotten true starters minutes while you're running out Neepkins and Charlize Ledger-Walker and Kiki Rice, Lauren Betts, and then you mix in Jaquez. You still got to get Dougal each minute, Sienna Betts. Those players are taking the bulk of the minutes. Not sure Chavez would have fit in, but she had a great night and dominated in overtime. Dominated and was hitting every big shot possible for Oklahoma, who beat South Carolina. South Carolina took their second loss of the year, first conference loss, although they did lose to Texas in a non-conference. So that means South Carolina has 2 losses. That should be significant, and lost to a team UCLA beat. While they did beat Texas, they lost in that same back-to-back Thanksgiving Eve, Thanksgiving Day tournament UCLA was in on the, beginning of the season? So that should negate their win and loss. They have a loss to a team UCLA beat, and South Carolina is currently number 2 in the country. If UCLA simply holds serve, if they remove the bias and the love that Don Staley's Gamecocks get all the time, the Bruins should be the number 2 team in the country. And most importantly, between South Carolina and Texas, they each have 2 losses, right? One to each other and one shocking loss elsewhere. Oklahoma's good, LSU is good, I get it, but the Bruins have handled almost every team they've faced, close to the top 10, top 15, whether it's Tennessee, Oklahoma, destroy Duke without Lauren Betts. They've beaten everybody in their path possible. Tennessee, cool. Now, if UCLA is still the 3rd team in the country come the next rankings, I think there's a problem. The only teams you could put ahead of UCLA are 1, UConn. You have to live with it, and I agree with it. And 2, Texas. Texas has beaten both South Carolina and UCLA. Despite their 2 losses, I think they're closer to being the 2nd team in the country. But under no circumstances, should South Carolina be ranked ahead of UCLA before the season's end. Not in the tournament, not in the poll, not in the net, nowhere should they be ranked ahead of UCLA until the Bruins lose a game, of which I'm not convinced they will do. I am not convinced Corey Close's team will lose another game before the end of the regular season. And their biggest battle will be at Michigan the first true weekend of February, where we'll see, can UCLA again stack up with UConn and beat a top 10 team? South Carolina had to scrap to beat USC on the road. The Bruins beat them down. Oklahoma beat South Carolina. Well, the Bruins beat Oklahoma. South Carolina beat and lost to Texas, but in that same week on the same neutral floor, Texas beat both UCLA and South Carolina. The Bruins are down big, but they made it a game late in the 4th quarter. And UCLA did not shoot a free throw in the first half. That's inexplicable. And then South Carolina, they didn't go to Austin to beat Texas. They beat them at home. Now, if they've gone to Austin to beat Texas, I think they have a leg up on UCLA. That didn't happen. And they've now lost to a team UCLA beat on a neutral floor? Okay. No chance South Carolina should be ranked ahead of UCLA for the rest of this season until the Bruins do have a hiccup, which I don't think they'll have. Texas has the best case despite 2 losses to be a 2 team, number 2 team in the country, and I respect it. A true strong voter would put Texas over UCLA at 2 despite the 2 losses, and I would live with that. But UCLA should still be number 2 at the next polling, and if it came down to seeding, I think Texas would be the 2, UCLA the 3, but you just don't want to face UConn earlier than you have to. You really want to stay on the West Coast for your regional in the first 2 rounds, and you want to be able to play on the West Coast Sweet 16 Elite 8 and have a shorter flight to Phoenix, where the Final Four is being hosted this year for the women's tournament. Who they're playing next? Northwestern. Another team right around, if not below 500, led by Grace Sullivan, a 22-point-per-game scorer, averages about 7 rebounds per game, 16 blocks, 25 steals. She's somebody who's 6'4", so will probably get matched up a little bit with Lauren Betts. I'm not too familiar in that matchup. It's another chance for a taller, bigger player for the opposing team who's a scorer and a rebounder to go up against Betts, who generally does not let anybody come through her paint. She dominates, whether it's steals, blocks, rebounds. And for her to showcase once again against the other team's best post player, she dominates almost every single matchup and can prove that she should be a number 1 pick in the WNBA draft, if not the number 2. So UCLA should beat Northwestern by 20 plus. Couple of tough games in Illinois. UCLA should win those in dominant fashion. If not, we'll be here to update you. But over the weekend, it should be a fairly easy 1, bump up in the rankings. 2, win over Northwestern. 3, Lauren Betts showcase as to why she's the best post player in the country. And if for some reason anything changes, that's what we'll discuss here on Locked On UCLA. More football, more men's basketball, and women's hoops, all here on Locked On UCLA. And hey, softball's number 10, and UCLA baseball is preseason number 1. We'll talk about all that here. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club. Get ad-free audio and join the Discord. Have some fun and be a part of the fam. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.